All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. This week's hangout topic is friendship. I think this should be kind of an interesting one. Also, I think maybe a little challenging because thinking about friendship in a culturally grounded way for ourselves is really hard, I think. It's hard to sort of push it away from yourself and think about it. But there are variations across the world in the way friendships are conducted and expectations of friends and that sort of thing. So I think it should be kind of interesting. The first thing that I wanted to mention is that the word friend does not always apply to people who are our friends. And so friend can range from things like acquaintance, somebody you know, right? But don't know particularly well, to classmate, right? My kids sometimes refer to their classmates that they despise as their friends. I remember I used to do that, like in elementary school, they were my friends because they were the people I hung out with. So it's maybe it's people you frequent. But of course, then you have like these deeper layers of friendship. So, people you would give your life for, who are nonetheless not romantically involved with you, right? So very close friends. And so there's a range. And then, of course, there's Facebook friends, which has its own definition and its own connotations and all this kind of stuff. Because Facebook friends could be people that you barely even know, or maybe you don't know at all, but yeah, you thought their timeline was interesting. Right? Oh, and there goes my telephone. So I'm going to just hang that up. I can't talk to you right now. Hey, hon, I want to hang out. Can I call you back? Okay, sorry. Bye.
Oh.
I only answered because she's my friend.
That's appropriate.
Well, I would not answer the phone if it were not a friend and I was on a hangout, right? Mm-hmm. So, then you have questions like, what do you call your friends and all this kind of stuff. But so what are your initial thoughts on friends? Have I caught a lot of the meanings of friend?
Well, I think that technology, things like this, like Hangouts and like Skype, also expand who we can be friends with. I know, I talk regularly to someone in Finland. I would consider her a friend.
Yep.
But I will probably never meet her in person.
Yeah.
I have long distance friendships before that through letters and such, but I think that there's got to be a very different feeling about that, a very different quality to it.
Yeah. So
and also our society, which is, I remember being in middle school and they were doing this whole thing about never meet someone you met online, which, when you're in middle school, that's great advice, but they were like talking about adults too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I had a friend that I met online. And in fact, this is the very person who was on the telephone. I met her on the Critters Critique group.
Oh, I know that.
Okay.
I'm terrible at it.
It has many advantages and some strong disadvantages as well. It's just a funny. It's its own idiosyncratic way of interacting with people, but it was very interesting because I met her and then we emailed a ton and then we're like, how about we talk on the phone because this is way difficult to like wing emails back and forth. So we started talking on the phone. But I remember the first time I met her in person, every time I looked away from her, I felt like I was chatting with my friend. And every time I looked at her, I was like, who is this strange person at the table with me?
Yeah. And, people I've talked to for years, I'm like, I don't want you to see my face because I'm not pleased with my appearance. And That's partially me just being insecure about my appearance, but it's also like I've been talking to these people for years and they don't know what I look like at all.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the Facebook picture or the Google Plus picture that's like 10 years old.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to
I've gotten over that.
go into friendship in world building and culture because I was watching something on TV and some character says to another one, "Oh, but we're friends." And my instant reaction was, "Oh my God, no, you're not. You just want something." And then I was thinking, aha, friendship is also a commodity people trade in.
Mm.
And whether you're, friends or not, but it's that layers of friendship. And then also I write middle grade, wherein friendship features a great deal. It's almost a given. In the same way romance is almost a given, I think, in YA.
Yeah.
So, so it's like you sort of, you have to deal with it and examine it.
Mm-hmm.
In ways that other fiction I don't think necessarily delves into.
That's interesting. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, restrictions on children's friendships that are imposed by grade systems, by how much time they spend in school, specifically with their very tight, narrow age groups.
You can be outside the age group a little bit. I was a year older because I had moved from Texas than most people in my grade. But I still wasn't hanging out with, the people a grade up.
Uh-huh.
So that's interesting how that, age-based restriction isn't completely age-based.
And
well,
then
it's actually culturally based. It depends, for example, on the culture of the school that you're attending.
Mm-hmm.
I have attended schools where, the 2 grades, like my middle school, my junior high, the 2 grades might as well have been casts. Right? Like,
yeah, we had a
no, we will not interact with you. You are a 7th grader.
Yeah, there was a whole system at my middle school of where you got to sit on the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
which I very much objected to, even though I didn't ride the bus.
Right.
But those things are also expanded by sibling sets, depending on how close you are to your siblings.
Yeah. Siblings can cause you to make friends across age groups. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And cousins.
Yeah.
Families.
Neighborhoods, back when you were allowed to I'm echoing, aren't I?
No?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not hearing it, but maybe.
No,
I'm getting it.
Oh, yay.
Juliet, I think it's on your end. Green. Hang out indicator dots.
Not sure what's.
Well, I'm not sure what I can do. I can mute for a second.
Let's see, is that happening anymore? No, that is not happening.
I'm not getting an echo. Do you have something playing in the background, Juliet? That might be doubling it?
I don't have anything playing in the background.
Okay.
But I'm not wearing headphones because I never wear headphones. I could try to go and look for some.
No. Let's just go on.
Sorry.
Could be noises. Different software.
Oh, by the way, Reggie figured out what her hissing snakes came from, so that was good.
Yeah.
Next time she visits, we'll be able to talk with her better. Okay, so I like this question of who are you allowed to make friendships with? That is really an interesting thing. Because this is where culture comes in, right?
Cultural and taste, I guess.
Well, castes or there are, there have been instances where people were not allowed to make friends because of racial issues, right?
Yeah.
Class divides.
Class divides, right. You know, sibling behavior. My husband was in a situation where somebody was not allowed to be friends with him because his sibling was doing something bad and that he would never do, but you know, yeah. Yeah, so there are all these divisions that people use. Gender, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it's like the boys and the girls at a certain point in school? Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of complication with that. And then of course there's the when Harry met Sally question, which is, can boys and girls be friends without thinking about sex, and having sex wreck everything? And my answer to that is like, of course they can. What are you thinking?
I know.
But also then that came out in a very even more heteronormative context.
Yeah. You know, yeah, that's more of a, that question is more of a register of the person asking it than of a general cultural situation.
Agreed.
To throw in the other point, people that you are supposed to be friends with, that they insist that you be friends with this person.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
For whatever benefit it's supposed to have for you or your parents.
Yeah. So like,
that's another commodity. If you're trying to make friends up the hierarchical ladder so that they'll do something for you or for your family.
Yeah, that's almost like,
okay, now we've got Robot Juliet.
Oh dear.
Is anyone else getting that?
Yes.
It sounds like you're speaking into a fan, and so do the echoes.
Wow.
Is there a push to talk option? I'm wondering if there's a push to talk she can use.
Don't know. Tools. Not a clue. Friendships, though. I can try to continue about friendships.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if I just keep turning it on and off, maybe eventually it'll get fixed. I don't know.
That sounds good. I think it might be.
Okay. So, people you are supposed to be friends with, people you're not supposed to be friends with.
Like mentors? I mean, I have my friend Deborah, who often attends the hangouts. She is a friend of mine now, but initially she was a mentor. And it took us a long time to be friends. Which I think is interesting, because I think that there is an implication when you're friends that neither of you is of higher status than the other.
I'm reminded there of what I know, at least, of the Confucian system of relationships, where even friendships were hierarchical. And I'm a little confused as to whether it was always the same hierarchy, or if it meant, because I haven't read the primary text, but is it that you're always superior in any given situation, or that one of them is always superior? I don't know, but
well, so let's talk about cultural situations where this differs. Okay, so it's easiest to look at situations where the language marks status. Okay, over time, so let's look at vous and tu in French. Vous is a formal form of you, right? And tu is the informal form of you. And historically, it used to be that this was a power-based metric. So if somebody had more power than you or was of a higher status than you, you would say vous to them, right? And I'm not sure if they, I mean, like, I think they could say tu to you. It could be a non-reciprocal thing. But over time, it's shifted and become much more reciprocal and solidarity-based rather than power-based. And so now it's more likely to be a reciprocal thing, and to indicate that we're ignoring potential rank differences between us, right? What's interesting, though, is if you look at Japan, Japan has a status consciousness that is very deeply ingrained in the language, and friendships also have status in them. Though I would say that those friendships don't, the way that status plays out in a friendship is different from the way that we would imagine status playing out. You know what I mean? It's sort of more like a tacit expectation. And, you know, there's this little thing that we always talk about where people bow to each other, and the person who's older tends the person who's younger tends to keep an eye out for how low the person who's older is bowing, so that they can bow a little deeper than that. At least in the older generations. I'm not sure about the way that the younger generation handles it at this point. But they are very aware of, say, for example, who is a senpai and who's a kohai. And these are probably terms that you might be familiar with because they're used in some anime contexts and stuff. A senpai basically means it's a person who's a little bit ahead of you in school. And yes, exactly. So even if you are close friends, there's the question of whether you're senpai and kohai. And it usually is not within a class, like like in school, it wouldn't be within your same class, but somebody who's a class above you would definitely be a senpai. All right, and you would be a kohai to them. And honestly, I wish I knew, like, I wish I could go in and study this, because I'm sure people have, but I haven't actually done, like, I haven't actually gone and looked for research on how friendships are conducted in Japan. I just have my own witness, and I've seen this stuff, but it's very hard for me as an American to keep these sort of status things in mind. In the US, people try to use all kinds of different things to raise their status, right? People will use, oh my gosh, people play power games in friendships all the time, right? People will try to control who their friends can be friends with, for example. And they will try to award favors. Like anything could be as simple as a fruit roll-up, right?
I remember that story.
Yeah. There was, the one girl who would always, like, magnanimously grant some petitioner her fruit roll-up. and it wasn't magnanimous at all, right? But she felt the need to feel her friends compete for her favors, right? Mm-hmm. And people do this in lots of ways. And, often you can see, like, one of the functions of school uniforms is to try to even out possible class distinctions between classmates, right? Classmates being in the same school class, versus class distinctions being rich versus poorer, or that kind of thing. Higher class versus middle class versus, working class. So, yeah. So Sarah, what were you going to say? Sorry, Morgan.
Sarah? Okay.
Sarah, you said something about Kalahari Desert.
Yeah, there's this one ethnography or culture that everyone seems to study, at least when I take intro to anthropology in high school and community college. Sorry, yeah, that's distracting. But one thing I distinctly remember is that there was a distinction between the generation immediately above you, where you had to have a more serious relationship with like your parents and then with your children, but with your grandparents or grandchildren, you could have a more friendly relationship. That repeated, like your great grandkids no, your great great grandkids yes, if you managed to have any, I guess. So that struck me as interesting, and I wonder. I don't doubt that the people raising you, there are always different expectations than other family members, but I wonder how it varies culturally, and I guess how strictly enforced it is across different cultures that the family members who raise you are different than the family members you can be friends with.
Yeah, what the various responsibilities are, because in some relationship families, the grandparents have more of the responsibility for raising a child than the parents would. Either the parents aren't there or the parents aren't able to carry out those responsibilities, or they're sharing it to some unusual to our society level, and that maybe the friendships between the grandparent and the grandchild would not be able to be so close. So I'm wondering, culturally and how much responsibility can you have for forming a child's moral and ethical centers and behavior and still be friends with that child.
There is always the question of control in a friendship. And it's almost like they're opposing things. And I think that's one of the questions that comes up in this question of, well, can you be friends with a parent? Right? And how directly can you, how close can you be with a caretaker who is responsible for controlling you on some level, right? Yeah. And also, the expectations of friendship are widely variable. So, like, for example, how well you keep in touch with your friends is really an interesting question. And whether you are friends with them across contexts or not is also an interesting question.
What conversations can you have with a friend and still be friends? There are certain topics I don't discuss with an old college friend because I found out we just have these very strong disagreements from different perspectives that we've gained, and we argue if we talk about medicine in particular, and there are things that I disagree with her about based on my experience, and she disagrees based on her education, and those things aren't going to get better. We can still be friendly if we talk about stuff that isn't really important or stuff that we do agree about. We survived a discussion about a man in college, but
yeah. Well, I think
actually about pain medications that was rough.
One of the things that I think is interesting here is when that thing that people say to each other when they're starting to feel sort of a little bit more than friendship, which is, I can talk to you about anything, right? Really, like, I think there's a level, I think it has to do with the level of trust, right? Whether you can feel safe with another person is a really important measurement of how deep and how close your friendship is, right? And I think maybe it has something to do with that borderline between being friends with somebody and almost being romantic with somebody, independently of physical attraction. There's also the very key sort of trust level relationship boundary, trust and safety.
There's also the issue of what can you talk about with a friend without it coming off as romantic interest?
Huh. Yeah, well, right. And then, of course, there's that sort of like, do I owe you anything for being nice? And the answer is, no, you don't. But yes, friendship is very fraught when you're talking about anyone with whom you could potentially have a romantic relationship, right?
But there's also the echo chamber effect of that goes with trust and safety. That there was never going to be any romantic thing between me and my medical school friend. That is, she's in medical school, not me. But I don't discuss those things with her because I don't feel safe doing that, because I know she's going to say something that's going to upset me. Particularly with social media groups, Facebook in particular, you do get echo chambers where people agree about things. They have the same views on something. It's a safe place if you friends lock it to talk about things that you feel strongly about. Nobody's going to come in and say you're wrong, or that's not okay, or you deserve bad things to happen to you because you believe that. And that's, I wonder if you can't quite get the same restrictions in real life, real world, physical world friendships, because you can't. I think the amount of discussion that you can have with most of the people you see in real life is limited.
Do you remember, I mean, I don't know if you guys had this experience, but I remember there was this period of time when friends of mine and I would sit in the hallways at school and talk about stuff, and we'd be arguing with each other about stuff we agreed about. Do you remember that? Like, I think one of the things that you can do with friends is you can argue about stuff that you actually fundamentally agree about. Sort of.
Like on the finer points, or?
Well, yeah, it usually ends up being.
But sometimes it
usually ends up being a sort of a terminology difference, or a stuff where people think that the implications are not quite what you think the implications are.
But actually,
yeah,
with me and my kid all the time, when it takes us a while to realize that we mostly agree, but we're seeing different implications, or we're seeing the same implications, but we're using different words. So that's the thing. But those are your feet that I was tripping over in the hallways there. Yeah, obviously not. But yeah, hallways, stairwells in dorms. And sometimes those are people that you lived with in the dorms, and sometimes it was people you chose to hang out with.
Yeah.
There's one. How does living together affect friendships?
Oh.
Well,
familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah. You have to. I mean, I've had a lot of roommates, and some of them were very successful, and some of them were not. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you deal with is questions of politeness, right? How politeness is defined, and what expectations each person holds. When you're sharing a living space, all of a sudden your obligations as far as politeness and duties relative to one another go way up, right? And so, you know, because you share a space, you have to come to some agreement. My husband likes to say that people who are going to get married to one another have to come to an agreement on the topics of religion and money and children, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to agree, but they have to come to some understanding that both of them hold about how those things are going to interact and who's going to be responsible for what. And so I think this is one of those things where if you're living with somebody, all of a sudden you have an obligation to reach agreement on a lot more things. So there's a great deal more taxing obligation potentially in the relationship.
Yeah. And it can melt down over those disagreements.
Yes. And you know what? We don't all have, like, we all have times when we can't even, right?
Oh, yeah.
And when you can't even, are you a person who needs to be entirely alone? That could be problematic. Or, you know, is your can't even state something that is going to impinge on everyone around you? Like, where do you go when you can't handle it anymore, right? And is that something the other person can tolerate, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that actually that's the case in any relationship. Like, but if you're living together, then there is no escape point, right?
Roommates have a better chance because if they aren't sharing, if they have a private space, if you have your own bedroom to escape to, then what you need is a polite way to say, I need to not be with people right now.
Yeah.
I still like living with you. I still care for you as a friend. I'm going in my room and closing the door. I'll be out when I'm ready to deal with people.
Yeah.
If you are married to somebody, you don't necessarily have that space, especially if you live in an open floor plan house. There are no separate rooms aside from your bedroom. Who gets the bedroom to hide in? Because even if you are alone in the open area, it's not your space. It's still a shared space.
Right.
There
So,
are no.
so you may feel less safe there because it's a shared space and you can't just relax. You have to constantly be thinking about what your obligations are to other people in the space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being aware of what people need in their days that have nothing to do with you personally, like what I just said about my friend and her husband's suit, I think would be important in
So people
maintaining
have
any shared
very
space.
basic needs that they have, right? And if you can understand them and go with them, then your chances of maintaining a long-term relationship, either a friendship or a romantic relationship, are higher. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of times you don't ever get to the point where you're encountering somebody's basic level needs, right? Like psychological needs.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that being a roommate does. So, right. I had trouble with a roommate in my sophomore year of college because she could not maintain boundaries for herself And because we shared a room, that meant that she wasn't maintaining the boundaries of our room. And this was a problem, because she would have people around who would be mean to her, and they were doing it in my space. I couldn't take it, you know? Yeah. So, you know, it's very challenging. And the other thing is, like, you know, do you have an obligation to air grievances with a friend?
That might depend on like cultural expectations and politeness levels. I was thinking, like, you know, royalty, you know, kings and queens, who are their friends and who can they trust to be friends? And it seems to be very difficult because at one point everybody wants something from them and they're perfectly aware, but they still want friends, but can't quite trust that anyone is genuinely interested in being their friends for anything other than power. So
power and money definitely complicate that friendship.
And what level of grievance? What kind of grievance? Does it involve something that you've done, something they've done? Does it involve another person?
I'm thinking about things like microaggressions, for example. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you microaggress against them, at what point are they obligated to say, "Hey, I've had enough of this crap," right? And in a way, that's a test of the friendship, right? And if you can get past it and stop the microaggressions, then maybe you'll be closer. But if you then blame the person for speaking up, then the friendship might fall apart. At the same time, I've had friendships with people fall apart because they had some grievance with me and they weren't telling me about it. And then eventually they were like, "Okay, we're done." And I'm like, "What'd I do?
What happened?"
And so there are these ways that we aggress against one another, even if they're not overtly spoken about, even if they're not, you know, microaggressions against marginalized groups or anything of that sort, right? But there's still these boundaries that we have, and we really resent having them crossed. And if we're not ready to say anything about it, then we may end up cutting off somebody who has goodwill, but who is making errors of ignorance, right? It's very tricky. Like, what kind of sensitivity do you expect from somebody if you're going to maintain a friendship with them? I always hate that sort of, well, you know, what's bothering you? Well, if you can't tell, then I'm not going to tell you.
Oh yeah, I know
that you have an obligation to be attentive to me and my needs, and I don't have an obligation to explain myself to you. That thing. Yeah.
And you're supposed to read my mind, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to love me so deeply you can just instantly, magically somehow tell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. Like, if you could magically instantly tell, if you had like a telepathic or empathic society, would you be better or worse friends?
Hard to say.
I mean, would you meet somebody instantly, like, know everything, and then just walk away from like the people you knew who you would just instantly hate? Like, you would just meet telepathy, and then boom, you know, or, you know, and so then you would just meet people, and then like, oh, we're friends, you know, you like.
That would be a world building question, Che. Go answer. Yeah. Actually, I do want to mention, specifically with regards to fiction, I have the word friend is an issue in one of the societies that I created. It's the one where I just finished the novella. It's the Wolf World. Because the way that the human being, the human guy whose name is Parker, The way that Parker uses the word friend implies that there is an interdependence without rank. Now, interdependence and rank are two of the major cultural concepts of the Aurel society. But they are in tension with one another, right? And you cannot have interdependence without rank in Aurel society. And so one of the major points of I just don't get this guy that occurs in the first story that I wrote is that Ruli, the main character, just does not have a concept of interdependence without rank, and it's reflected in the way you're supposed to speak to one another. And in particular, there's the story is called Cold Words, and if you want to read it, if you haven't, it's in you can find it in Neil Clark's Forever magazine because he reprinted it last year, I believe. I think it was May. But anyway, so Cold Words is the name of this dialect that you use if you are claiming a position of dominance over somebody else. And it's non-reciprocal. So the person that you claim a position of dominance over has to speak warm words to you and accept the position of submissive, or you guys are going to have a fight. It's a rank dispute, right? And then once you've figured out the rank dispute, you know who's higher ranked, and then whoever's higher ranked uses the cold words. So the trick is that Parker shows up. He knows how to speak both cold words and warm words because everybody does. But he wants to have, like, he feels like, okay, so Parker's not a small dude, all right? But he's not a 6'4" wolf. So he feels like he cannot possibly take a position of dominance over Ruli, because Ruli is a complete, like, scary looking dude, right? And also humans have things they want. They want to be able to create a relationship. They feel like petitioners on this planet, right? They have a lot of power, obviously, but Parker himself could get killed or kicked off, easily. He's in a bit of a vulnerable situation. So he doesn't feel comfortable speaking cold words to Ruli. Problem is that Ruli doesn't feel comfortable speaking cold words to him for separate reasons, because Ruli feels like a petitioner to him because he wants to make a deal with humans that will bring their riches and their influence into his own homeland and help his people who are oppressed by another group on the planet. Okay? And so they have this weird relationship at the start where Ruli's like, I can't possibly dominate him. And Parker's like, I can't dominate him. So they end up both speaking warm words to each other, which implies that they have an intimate relationship. Not necessarily a romantic relationship, but that they are, for example, litter mates, right? Or
besties,
right? People don't have, in this society, people don't have a reciprocal warm words conversation in public. They just don't, right? Unless they're gutter hounds, in which case everybody just speaks the warm words and we don't worry about it because we know we're all pieces of crap, kind of thing. So this is one of the things that happens in Cold Words, is that Ruli is struggling with this because every time he stops looking at Parker, he tends to think of him intimately as though they were brothers. And whenever he looks at him, he goes, why are we speaking warm words together? And so it causes this great internal conflict for him because he doesn't know how to wrap his brain around the concept of friend as Parker has explained it to him, right? And it's one of the things that he actually figures out over the course of this, relationship and the course of this initial story is he actually uses the word friend in the last line of the story to refer to Parker, because he's finally gotten to the point where he and Parker trust one another to a certain extent. And do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah. So anyway, I was playing with the word friend deliberately in that story. And I reference it actually in the current story, because once Ruli has learned the word friend, he has an opportunity where he's trying to explain his relationship with Parker to another person he knows. And he's like, but I'm his friend. And he's like, I can't say that to her because it won't mean anything. It took me a year to figure this out. And so after he's figured it out, it's kind of isolated him from other people in his society in terms of his ability to explain his relationship with Parker, because people aren't going to get it. And so it's kind of fun, right? And I kind of did it accidentally. But it grew out of, the whole discussion of the word friend grew out of the way that I had designed this non-reciprocal status language and some of the personal implications of using it in a particular way. So, things you can do with friendships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, what lengths do you go to maintain a particular friendship? Like what will you keep your mouth shut on to preserve this connection that you have? And do you have to maintain it? And in some contexts, you certainly might. I mean, especially if it's the favor of someone much higher ranked, then you just keep your mouth shut and go along with it. Like, go along with whatever they say, because it's like you have to stick this out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so they have this concept in the society of huntmate, right? Which is somebody who shares purposes with you, right? But even if you're huntmates with somebody, you do have a rank difference. You just have a shared purpose. It doesn't necessarily mean that, well, we're working on this project together. That means we're huntmates.
Well, that's interesting, because like you could like introducing a new idea for friendship to this world. It's one of those things, like, it might catch on. I liked Morgan's observation of, is friendship universally, is it just humans? Would only humans have the concept of friendship?
Well, I mean, so there are animals that prefer solitude, and there are animals that prefer society, as a general rule.
Yeah.
And people tend to survive better in groups. Just typically, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions, right?
Yeah.
And certainly we know that there are introverts and people who really prefer to have their alone time, and that's fine. But I think we could say as a species, we have the need for society of some variety.
People who don't are kind of seen as, I'd say, sick, and it would be interesting to see the inverse of that, where needing companionship is seen as deviant or sick.
Cats.
Yeah.
Cats.
Well, people
would be
are
like
already in our society anyway looked down on for being needy, because they want attention of other human beings, because they want to spend time with other human beings, and that's perceived by many people as weakness. But I think that's cultural. There's this tension, right?
There's particularly in toxic masculinity, you've got this expectation that somebody is supposed to be able to take care of everything themselves. I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as looking down on them for association with other people, though. Because even if you are able to handle everything yourself, you're still expected to engage in certain types of social behaviors. They just aren't expected to be somehow emotionally vulnerable in some ways. I mean, we could talk for like ages about sports and their role in the lives of many men, because they provide a language of intimacy and emotional communication that does not get approved of in a toxic masculine context, right? But that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to associate with other people. It just means that you aren't supposed to associate in a vulnerable way with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. I just wrote this down. The friendship bonding rituals and procedures. Like, you don't think about that in everyday context, but that is sort of, but there are sort of rituals and procedures, and it'd be interesting to take that into a culture where there are specific rituals and specific procedures.
Right. And I think there are specific procedures, but we just do them without thinking.
Probably, yeah. If it were like ritualized, formalized, that would be interesting.
I saw a little cute video of there's a teacher who has memorized a different secret handshake for every one of his students.
Oh my God.
And as they come into class in the morning, he does the secret handshake differently with every kid. And it's like, right?
Wow.
But at the same time, you could see how that is a friendship ritual, right? It's a recognition of your importance ritual that this teacher engages in to create a bond with his students.
Names. Use names and true names and nicknames.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, what Sarah just said.
Yep.
But that's not a thing you can do in classroom setting, names, because you can't speak someone's true name in the middle of a classroom if it's just a private thing, because...
But there are teachers who nickname their students.
And nicknames are, be different from full names, and names.
Yes.
Yeah, nicknames are often unaffectionate.
We should do names some point.
Oh, we have.
There's a whole
but we
thing.
could totally
do it again.
A lot.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
Well, we should do something. We could do like specifically things like nicknames and contexts for those, the varying contexts, because there's like criminal nicknames, affectionate nicknames.
Yeah, let's do that.
You know, etc. So we could do nicknames.
Yes. You know, in some ways, I'd love to discuss vocal intimacy. Because you speak differently, like baby talk, and the way you talk to your cat and stuff.
Oh God, I know. Yeah, which is how you talk to babies, right? Oh my God, I talk to my bird like that. I used to talk to Igor, and then I try not to.
Why would you try not to? I'm as goofy as they come when I talk to my cats. My son is sitting over there playing video games, and he's all, "You're so cute, Mom." My goodness,
you know, because you go into these baby voices around cute animals, like inevitably.
So let's call this topic wrapped up for today. Thank you all for being here. Next week, we're going to have a guest on the 7th at 10 a.m. Marshall Ryan Maresca, who was supposed to come the day after the election, and we're all feeling too terrible. So it will be great to see him and talk about his new book, and that will be fun. And then we'll do I think we're not going to do nicknames. I think I'm going to call it intimacy names,
Okay.
or in-group names.
That's a good name for it.
Maybe in-group names, because I think that would cover the criminal aspect of it, and so we could even do like in-group indicators, but the concept of in-group and how it is reflected in language, I think, is going to be sort of the general topic.
Yeah, because it's like you see that so often, but nobody ever really like, well, especially like in fantasy, you know, there's like three-fingered Willie the pirate or something, you know, and I mean, well, that was a really bad example, but you know what I mean, like gangster names and stuff. Like people do them, but I'm not sure.
His book is an import of intrigue, I believe. Yeah. So anyway, we'll see him next week, and then we'll talk about in-groups, and I'm going to stop the broadcast so you can ask me the questions that you want to ask me off the air. All right? Thank you.